welcome to the podcast, Sarah Blackwell. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
I've brought you on because I felt it'd be worthwhile having an episode around forest schools, as it's a podcast around education and learning. And there's probably nobody more qualified globally than yourself to talk about forest schools in all of its glory. Absolute pleasure. So I thought we'd start really with who is Sarah Blackwell? How have you got to this point? You're sat in front of me, able to talk about forest schools and being the world's biggest authority on that.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting one because I say to people quite often that when you were a child, what did you believe that you were going to become? You know, when you were big and grown up, and I had all the normal, sort of like role play initiations in terms of being a nurse, and my auntie was a nurse, and that was it, and I loved her a lot. And so I suppose in a way, caring for people and looking after people and being able to provide an opportunity to show love, care and compassion was something that I got from her that I didn't necessarily have in other areas of my life. I hated the outdoors. I'll be incredibly honest. My parents used to drag us out every Sunday, literally. And we would get up early, and we would go down to the local, like nature trail, which actually incredibly beautiful, down by the river, along a massive path all the way through the forest on the outskirts of Bristol, or it was on the outskirts of Bristol then. And we'd go, but it wasn't a walk for children. It was a walk for grown-ups, and it was a walk that you were going to do whether you liked it or not. You weren't allowed to play. You weren't allowed to jump on things. One time I did jump on something and then I fell off and broke my leg. So, of course, they thought that was almost hilarious because it was an I told you so moment, but instead of sympathy, I got tragedy and I got blame and I got a sense of guilt. And so I guess, did I associate that with the outdoors? I don't know, maybe. All I know is that I didn't like it because I wasn't made to feel special. Nature wasn't my teacher. Nature wasn't a good thing for me. It didn't give me peace. It didn't give me calm. It just gave me anxiety. So there was no way I was ever going to do anything like this. But I kind of like grew up in an environment that kind of led me into, I was useless at school, ran away from school for the first time when I was 6. I think, hurrah, hurrah. Thought I was quite brave. I went to a different part of the woods this time. I didn't have to cross over 2 big roads to get there because we could only do that with mummy and daddy. I just literally went over the road, but I'd been told the day before by my friend at school that the Osmonds were going to come and pick me up in their helicopter. And so I was very excited about it. Sadly, probably my parents aren't alive anymore, but should they have known how excited I was and not worried at all about being left or leaving that life behind, they'd have been mortified. But I took my recorder case and I took my toothbrush, because then obviously I could play in the band and I would have very big white teeth in order to be able to sparkle at the camera. Lo and behold, the Osmonds never arrived, but I did have flashing lights, which was cool. When the police arrived, and my father in his suit, looking very bedraggled, and the headmaster. Only again to have another very negative experience in the outdoors, which was, you'll get lost, you'll get hurt, there'll be dangerous people here, there'll be dogs, you have to go to school while you run, all of these kind of things, and trying to be brought back into the realm, really. And that was the beginning of my antisocial behavior. I have to say, regretfully, I was a very difficult child, and I didn't get on with my dad at all because he was very authoritarian. And in the same way that today that children have got very different personality types, I'm very much of a fiery person. Not that I've got defiance disorder, not at all, not by any stretch of the imagination. But what I needed was to be nurtured. It was like my dad would paint a room, but I wasn't allowed to help. My dad would make some carpentry, but I wasn't allowed to pick up a saw. My mum would cook, but I couldn't cook with her. My mum gardened, but I wasn't allowed to garden in case I put everything out of line or I broke it. So none of those relationships, none of that learning that I could have achieved from my parents I ever really got. So I was pressurized by peers. That's the Osmonds. I hated authority. I hated education. I left school when I was 15. I went to college. I got chucked out of social biology. I managed to get an AS level actually, in social welfare. That was my part of my course to become a social worker. I got 22% in psychology and I got chucked out of sociology because I just didn't revise. I didn't do anything. I didn't read. I couldn't read. I couldn't concentrate. I was a classic. My brain is it's a classic ADHD brain. I'm all over the place. So there's no way that I can sit down and concentrate and do anything for longer than about 2 minutes. So why do I want to read a book on social biology? And so I left that and I got a job with CSV, which is a bit like VSO. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I said I wanted to go to London. I'd got some friends who lived down in London and I wanted to go down and work in with the down and outs down there. And, they wouldn't let me. They said I was too vulnerable as an 18-year-old, so they wouldn't let me go. But of course I knew everything and I was going to be great and I was going to be fine. And I probably would have, to be honest, because I'm a person who's, pretty robust and what I don't know, I don't know. And therefore it can't hurt me. And if anything had, then I'd probably seen it as a jolly good adventure, something along those lines, a bit Enid Blyton-y. But so they sent me down to a residential alternative provision down in just outside Barnstaple in North Devon, funnily enough.
I know Barnstaple. Yes, I used to holiday down there quite a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, it was placed just outside. It was called Chelfham Mill, still there
I think I know what you
near the
mean.
Chelfham
Yep.
Viaduct. There's a school at the bottom. And that's where I worked. It's still there. Roger Burland, he was the guy who ran it, and he was very influential in my life, like massively influential, and massively influential in the whole of alternative provision at the time, as well in the like the early 80s. Wrote loads of books, and he got a lot of funding. So a lot of the kids that he had were from 6 to 11, who were deemed unable due to behaviour issues to remain in school. And so they were put at great expense down on this beautiful farm down in North Devon. And I became, silly them, a residential social worker. And my job was to I worked at weekends and I worked before school. I used to work overnight, and I used to work in the mornings as well. And I was there doing development programs. I was there doing sport. I was doing outdoor stuff. We'd go down the beach. Any time off, we'd go down. The guys that I used to work with, they all surfed. It was amazing.
What an amazing journey! But so at what point then? So you're down there and you're social working. At what
Yeah.
point did because obviously clearly what you are is someone who is creative, slightly rebellious, with a need to be free. And that there must be something of that. That's all what's come out of that conversation there. What has driven that personality then from somebody who hated going for these walks with their parents to go, I know what would be great. Let's set up a thing or create a thing called Forest School. Did it exist already? I mean, my understanding is you seem to be the biggest authority on this, and it's a whole concept you've created.
Yeah. So basically, I ended up really quickly. I ended up going from there, running away from there with a band of hippies in a red and green bus, traveling around Europe. I won't go into a lot of detail, but then we ended up coming back. Barnstable, had my first child, lived in the bus still, went back and travelled again. But my husband's dad had died, and we decided to go back to Sheffield for Christmas to be with his mum and his family. And then basically from there, that was 39 years ago, and we stayed. So I stayed. I was doing circus stuff. I used to work and do play schemes for kids from Orgreave and from the miners' strikes in communities that are fractured and broken to pieces. And like all the terrible infrastructure that was falling to pieces there. And I just saw how these children just needed a focus. So there were children that were called naughty and chucked out of school, but they were like me. They weren't naughty. They were just, and I use the word disappointed because I've got all kind of tingly now, actually, because I believe that every single child is born into this world with a right, a birthright to be loved, cared for, cherished, protected, and looked after until they choose to step out into independence. It's a thing about, I want you to be independent in the world, and I'm going to help you to do that. I'm not going to just let you go, and I'm not going to keep you where I need you to be as a parent. I understand that you're a unique entity, and I want you to outgrow me as a human being. And it came from that, really. So there's that Roger Berland, there's the traveling, alternative cultures from very middle class, you know, where money was everything, stature was everything. You can imagine, can't you, the 1960s, 1970s, boardroom dinner parties with wives coming round, having cocktails and all of that. That's what I was brought up in, and I just detested it. Money was, when I say money was evil for me because it bought people. It made them liars and made them cheats. And not what happens out there, but it made them liars and cheats inside families. And that I just abhorred. And so that's why I ended up in a bus. Well, that's why I ended up down in Devon, why I ended up in a bus, why I ended up in Sheffield. Had my son. I was 19. I mean, God forbid anyone from a middle class upbringing who was going to go to university, become a doctor or a lawyer or something and be a businesswoman, you know, to have a child at 19. It was just completely irresponsible. And when I had my second son, my parents rejected him because he was autistic. They would literally, he would be blanked. He was so abnormal to them that they could not even recognize he was there. He did get his comeuppance once, because he said to my mum, he said, "Old woman," he said, "why aren't you listening to me?" You know, and obviously she was like completely all over the place. We just had to go out howling. You know, it was just like, we've all been wanting to do that for such a long time. So it kind of went from that. And then I became a specialist worker for a young woman with autism in Rotherham. And that was amazing. And they took them on a weekend's adventure, like an outdoor centre. And I met some of the staff there and I thought, yeah, I could give this a go. I understand what you're doing. From there, I did my outdoor qualifications at Sheffield College. And then one of the teachers, I did environmental science, sorry. And it's actually my highest GCSE or O level or whatever it was at the time because I got B. And he said, look, you know, you're always ham short of a sandwich, Sarah, but I've got the perfect degree course that you might really like. And I went, well, I'm not going to university. There's no way. And this is July. All right. He said, here's the telephone number. This is where you have to go to. And I went, oh, okay then. And so I went down, met someone and they said, oh yeah, okay. I mean, by this point, I was a mature student, remember. Now I've got 3 children by this point. So I got 3 children. I got 2 boys and a girl. And I started with my degree. I mean, who else does a degree applying on the last day of July, starting 2 weeks into September? It was completely ridiculous. So I did countryside recreation management and it's split into 2 parts. So very, very quickly, it's split in terms of your choices. So you could do the whole environmental side of it, or you could do the people side of it. And I just wanted to do the whole people side of it, your demographics, you know, of like, it wasn't fiscal studies as in the terminology it sounds like, but it was about wealth of humanity and people and environments. And how can we bring that into inner city areas? And I did a lot of work in inner city parks and looking at ways, why is it that this park in Sheffield is dirty and messy and untidy? And why is this one really, really prim and proper? And it's about obviously where the council taxes were, where the social dynamics was. And I mean, it was great because that particular part got used for tram lines about 3 years ago, you know. I was like, so, you know, all these amazing people were going down there because it's such an amazing provision. I mean, it was an interesting place, and it was all about what people expect when they go into natural environments. And the people in that particular area of with the posh ones, they cut all the rhododendron bushes down. No, sorry, up, so that the homeless people couldn't sleep underneath them. You know, because they would go in and hide behind them at night, and then leave their sleeping bags there. You know, so whereas in the other one, they didn't really care because the people within that community didn't count as much. And that's what I felt. They didn't count. And so it spurred me on even more, really, then. And I then got the opportunity to go and do. Just before that, I actually had my fourth child. I left in the March. I left in the March for holiday, in March, April, June time for holidays. And then you're back in September for the beginning of the term. But in that period, I actually had a baby. And so my baby boy was like 5 days old and stuffed up my jumper. And I went back to roll on the first day back of the last year. And everybody was like, oh my God, you've got a baby. And it's like, yeah. And it was like, well, where did you get that from? So, well, I've been procuring it for the last 9 months. And there was a massive debate, though, in the university, like humongous. She can't come in, do this. She can't do a final year with a baby. She's got to come back the year after. And what was really interesting, it was all the women who were anti me coming back. And it was all the blokes and all the men lecturers who said, no, she'll be all right, don't worry, be fine. So I went back and did my degree, and I got first with honours. And I got a CPRE award for my dissertation, which was on the outdoor environment and how it impacted on self-initiated communication with children with autism. And I remember somebody nicked my dissertation from the university, so it's actually not there anymore, and I don't have a copy of it anymore. But I tell you what, 48% increase in self-initiated communication with children in an outdoor environment over being in a classroom. So it's not the fact that they're not getting the techniques from the language and development from what's going on around them. It's the fact that they don't have they didn't have the confidence or the excitement or the freedom or something massive that was their own in order to be able to use that language for. And that just floored me. You know, that my son's autistic.
And I
So it
guess,
was
I mean, blimey, there should be a Netflix series or something about it, shouldn't there? They should make a film of all what you've just described there, because I don't even know where to start with asking questions really on it, because I picked up on so many things. You know, it's that idea that you're talking about, the focus on the unique individual. It's interesting how you ended up getting your degree from where you were, and it kind of proves that point that education can be a lifelong thing, and intelligence can always be there, but the environment or the place or the object of study might not be right until you're older. And it's the importance of getting the right environment, the right things for young people to study is going to be key, isn't it? But I guess it's for people to have an understanding of. So we've got to this point of talking about forest schools, but for people to understand what a forest school actually is, because I know there's that old adage, isn't there, that forest school is kids around a fire toasting marshmallows, blah blah blah, and there's so much more to it than that, isn't it? I mean, I've done your training, so I've done the level 3 qualification, and I would say genuinely, I think it's one of the most challenging things I've done in terms of my input and my academic and all those kind of things, because there is so much to think about, not just in relation to the material you're given, but about yourself as well. It's a real reflective exercise, isn't it, doing the forest school program? And if you then go on and implement it correctly, I can see where everything you've just said is invaluable, and particularly picking up straight away there, you know, the idea of communication and how kids change in that environment. I mean, just simple examples of taking kids for a walk in the wood, kids that don't talk or don't engage or seem, I can never find the hook in the classroom, are suddenly fascinated about talking about some tadpoles at the edge of a pond, or, you know, what species of duck is that? And then suddenly you get this communication.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a point is really to ask that question. What is, you invented it, if you like, what is forest school?
Well, I think what's key here is the fact that I invented Archimedes forest schools, the Archimedes forest schools approach.
Yeah.
And that's why the information that you get on one of our courses is unique to us. That's the truth, is that there'll be no other forest school provider. There was no others when I set up. We were the very first company, not only in the UK, but actually in the world, to set up, the first company to set up and actually deliver forest schools training. And I wrote the course. I wrote the course content. It's changed massively, obviously, because in 25 years, the stuff that we know now that we never knew then is absolutely phenomenal. And I think forest school should be a 3-year degree, honestly. I do. At least 1 year, full time, more intense than an MA. I think that's what it should be, because this is like life-changing stuff. I have to be careful that I do not try and put too much into the level 3 qualification, because otherwise it is going to stop people from accessing sitting around the fire and having a good time with the kids and communicating in a nutshell. Because in order to be able to get this into schools, we need to make sure that it's accessible to schools. In order for us to get it into nurseries, we need to make sure that it's accessible for them. That's why it's very, very difficult for me, having explained what I've already explained, to actually find a fine balance with that. Because I will say that I'm a forest school fascist. Is the fact that, and not a forest schools fascist, that's mean. I'm an Archimedes forest schools fascist. This is the way it's done. And if you don't fit my standards, and I'm really sorry, but you don't pass. But that isn't a good way to look at it. Because
It's a passionate way to look at it, though.
oh yeah, well, I mean, I've got to stay with passion. It's
Yeah.
inspiration. It's the one thing in my life that I can talk about forever. And I get incredibly inspired by it. And I can go off on, I mean, you're lucky you didn't actually have me for your training. I mean, the amount of tangents that I go off on when I'm doing training can be, people, I can see, I actually give people cues now. I say, look, if you don't know where I've gone to and you're lost, please just put your head in your hands, or get up and walk off. All right, I'll get the message, because I won't know I've done it.
Yeah.
Forest schools for me is a rite of passage for our kids, but it's not just for our children. Rite of passage for adults too. This is why I actually wrote the level 4 training. This is why I set up the kindergartens, because I don't want forest schools to end when children leave school. I employ over 50 people. I employ trainers. At one point, I had 14 associate trainers. A lot of those have gone on now to actually deliver forest schools training by themselves for their own companies. And I feel that I am privileged for them to have been given a livelihood that they desired, that met their needs. Because a lot of the people that we'll have through that want to do it are very similar to the kids, very similar to me.
Yeah.
They hate school,
Yeah.
hate school, don't like it, don't understand it. What's the point? Because school didn't tell me any of the exciting stuff. And I did, I actually got my PGCE, which was hilarious, because I don't want to be a teacher. I never did, but it was another free course. And I got into it because it was business studies, because they wouldn't let me do geography because I hadn't got geography A level. They said, go back and do geography A level, then you can come and become a geography teacher. And I said, I've just done a 3-year degree in countryside recreation management. What are you talking about? And so they said no. And so I went off and did a business degree and became a teacher and went off and taught in schools. And everything that I believed about school was true. But I got given the naughty kids, and it was brilliant. because in business studies, we set up businesses. We did all the things that they'd been told they were rubbish at. So we did writing resumes, writing job applications, job applications for other people, looking at estate agents. Where would you buy something? How much do you need? What's your funding? How are you going to present yourself to the bank manager? How much funding, how much is going to come in? How much is going to go out? And all these amazing projects and all the artwork and the creativity that went out there. And like, here's a bundle of sticks, go and sell them to people. It's Christmas. How much money can you make? That whole kind of Dragon's Den. And it was great. I mean, these were kids who could sell ice to a man anyway. So, and it was great. But they were also kids who you'd hear their parents at the end of the year go, how did your GCSEs go? And they'd go, oh, I got 1 or 2. And the parents would say, don't worry, just get pregnant and the council will give you a house. And it was that mentality. There was no aspiration in it. But I did it, and I'm really sorry to have to put my hands up at this. I did it so I could put PGCE at the end of my name, and then I could go and speak to head teachers with an air of authority and say, we can do this better. We can do this better. I'm a teacher. I've taught in schools. I've taught in college. I've taught in university. I've done all of those things. I know what it's like. Your life is hell. How can we make your life as a teacher and your teaching staff better? And this is how we're going to do it.
But is that also not a bit of forward? That's a bit of forward thinking on your part there, isn't it, really? To say this is a stepping stone to me having a voice, if you like. I need to be one of them. And if it's necessary to do that, to become one of them, they're going to listen to me more, then I can see the value in that. I mean, that idea of it being a rite of passage as well, that this is something that all kids need access to. And I guess it's also in this sort of in the current climate as well. I've been reading other things, not necessarily around forest school, but I've been reading The Anxious Generation. I forget the author, where he's talking a lot about how kids are sort of, the screen generation are losing connection with play, and they're losing connection with a play-based generation. But they're also, I guess, losing a connection with nature by doing that, because so much of my childhood was naturally nature-based, because I would be either up in a wood with my mates, we'd be trying to light a fire, we'd be find an old building to try and knock down, or, you're out with your bikes. And that's maybe has sort of, and bearing in mind we are recording on tech here, but there's something about forest school that in a world of screen time has to be massively benefiting kids.
Yeah.
And was that, I mean, back when you first thought about this and you first started it, maybe that was less of an issue, but it's certainly become more of an issue. So what was the sort of main motivation? What was the main motivating factor for thinking, what will kids get out of this? What will young people get out of this? And adults as well, teaching it?
From my point of view, I started working with disaffected youth. So it was 10-year-olds to 15s. I didn't get it. I actually didn't get it. And I was looking around me. Remember that I'd worked in the outdoor industry, so I became an outdoor person too. And so I worked in an outdoor centre, and I was offering bespoke courses to young people who were being churned out of school, the last of year 7, for a week, because this is what schools do. They go on a week's adventure holiday. I went on a week's adventure holiday, and you probably did as well.
I did that. Pleasure Hunter in Wales. Still remember it? Yep.
There you go.
Barmouth.
And well, there you go. You see, and you remember it. What do you remember about it most?
I remember going up, and I forget the name of the place. The blue, it was kind of a blue lagoon. It's a chemical, something in the water that made the water crystal clear and iridescent blue in a canyon. I remember kayaking. I remember capsizing. I remember they had a pet sheep that weed in the refectory where we were eating. I remember rock climbing, and my friend who I've not seen since primary school, Claire Alloway, crying on the rock face because she got stuck halfway up. I have quite distinct memories of that trip, bearing in mind I was probably 10 or 11 at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but incredibly, because those memories are either they're stuck in your long-term memory because they were either very, very happy memories, very funny memories, or very scary memories. So those are the things that we hold on to. And what I know is that for those children who are 10 years old, they've had 10 years worth. If they're not doing well in school, they've had 10 years worth of dysfunction somewhere, be that at home, be that at school, be that just in the local community. It doesn't really matter. And so it's going to take them a minimum of 10 years to get that right, if not more, if not a lifetime, if they ever do. If they carry on in exactly the same way as they're going, believing what they believe about themselves at age 10, 11, 12, 13, then every single emotional memory that they have will get compounded by an intellectual memory that they can think about, and then the emotions get pushed down further and further and further away that they can't remember them anymore. So they won't remember what it is that made them sad, or what it was that made them feel unsafe or insecure or unloved. It'll just be there as part of their being. And then it's not addressed. And then they grow up and they become the same child, but just in a bigger body. And I wanted to do something that was going to stop that. And I know that school doesn't work, but I knew, even though I was doing outdoor activity, it's why in forest schools we don't have activities, you see. We do outdoor experiences and opportunities.
I've written down here opportunities over activities. Yeah. Yeah.
Because activities are led and designed by grown-ups. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when we're doing forest schools, they're about experiences that the children can take anywhere they want to. And they're opportunities for them to learn. So I've got a phrase and it says, everything you teach a child, you take away their potential to learn. So when you give them the answer to something, then they've lost that hoo-ha moment, that moment of self-discovery, that self-exploration, that curiosity gets, and goes back to my dad a little bit. So this is what I'm saying is that he wouldn't even teach me, but he took away my curiosity because I wasn't even allowed to find out and make a mistake. Somebody said to me on one of the training courses actually the other day in Guildford, and they went, failure is the first attempt at initiating learning. I thought, I'm going to use that. Fail, Fail. The first attempt at initiating learning. I just thought that's it. Most of our children aren't taught how to fail. We're taught how to be leaders, but we're not taught how to be followers. We're taught how to speak up, but we're not taught that we're allowed to be introverted. We are allowed to be neutral, beige, but we can't be too loud because otherwise we're crazy. We can't be too quiet because otherwise there's something wrong with us. We can't be too proud because otherwise we're arrogant. And I wanted to give these children an opportunity to find their voice. And we did that through using nature as a second teacher and recognizing that the child was the first teacher.
So increasing that, I know you talk about this a lot, this sort of increasing nature connectedness, using that as the tool to do that. And I have a quote here, and I think it is you. This side of emotional contact is more important than contact alone. So setting up these situations outdoors where they're creating those opportunities for that emotional contact are invaluable with each other, with the world around them, to explore themselves. It's almost Piaget, isn't it? Sort of child as scientist. Get out there. You're gonna do this discovery, and you're learning for yourself. It's a really interesting. I sort of always think of it as what's my analogy? Sort of diggers versus spreaders. Creating children who are going to really dig deep into things because they're motivated to do it, as are being told something which sits on that sort of spread surface level sometimes. Or my note down here is only in reference to sort of beach school was sunbathers versus beachcombers. If you set them up the opportunity on a beach, what are they going to do? Are they going to lay there like a sunbather? No, they're not. They're kids. They're going to get up and they're going to go. And I've seen it this last week with my own girls. Out there just looking for interesting stones on the beach to collect hours, just looking down at stones and trying to find the best ones. But creating those memories, that emotional sort of connection with it. It's really important. Really, really important.
What my friend says is like the kids, I can take them to Dubai, I can take them to Disneyland, but they still prefer to go to Filey.
I think exactly right. Completely right. You just sort of release them into nature, and they have the best time, don't they? They find things to do themselves.
Because money is the answer. Yeah. And the other thing is this thing about as we get more and more into a stressful environment, is that I want our children to understand that the more time they spend in a natural environment, and don't forget that when I wanted to set this up, when my son was born, and I did want to set this up, and I wouldn't have been listened to because I was 19 years old. I lived in a bus and I was as somebody called me, a pseudo hippie. I was a pretend one because I came from a middle class background. I was trying to, rebel against it, which is true. But it didn't mean that I didn't want the right things. I didn't know what the right things were, but I just knew what I didn't want. And nobody would listen to me because there was a whole atmosphere, a whole thought process, a whole disquiet and fear about these bloody hippies and what they do and this whole transcendental Eastern culture kind of stuff, she says, talking from Asia. And we don't want any of that woo-woo stuff. It all has to be, we're grounded, Industrial Revolution, Victorian elements and all of that kind of stuff. We can't do it. And what I wanted to do is to, as time's gone on and the research has caught me up, and I'm so happy about it, is the fact that, we know that you can walk through the trees and do forest bathing, that it's good for your cortisol levels. There's coming from the trees, the relaxation, the fact that in Japanese, you've got Japan in the city centers, you've got gardens where you take your shoes off at lunchtime and you walk through water and pebbles and, or, the barefoot walks and all of these kind of things. And the proof is there that it is unquestionable that we are of biology, of nature, and we are biological beings.
Does it spin back to the idea that is forest school in some way helping young people to reconnect almost with their caveman being, their young caveman, their young tribal, that this is, like you say, it's biologically innate there in you, isn't it? But I think as well, what you've done is you've chosen your tool, haven't you? You've realised this is the one thing you can contribute and you can do it well. And it has positive outcomes. It's going to have positive outcomes on mental health. It may even have positive outcomes if it was, the more widespread it becomes, the more widespread it gets used. Will it have positive outcomes on even pressure on the NHS? Because if young people are learning to access the outdoors more and the benefits of that, they'll take that into adulthood. It'll have that positive impact. There's been proven impact, hasn't there, on academic success where forest skills have been implemented in schools, not just at the primary level, but right the way through and onwards into life. So it is a real positive, isn't it? Having this respect for nature, understanding nature, carrying it into adulthood is amazing. And I think as a tool, your passion comes through on it really, Sarah, as well. Actually, you are one of the most passionate people I've ever met on any topic that I've ever spoken to about here. But it's also, there's a big move, isn't there? And this connects to what you're doing. I think you're kind of ahead of the game on this. This connection to all the white papers coming out on the value of play. Young children are not, because of the screens and things, are not necessarily playing in the same way. And we used to play in the outdoors. We created our own forest schools, didn't we, when we were younger? Effectively, you're out there doing those things without adult supervision or anyone needing to tell us how to do it. But you talk, don't you, about play being their work for children. Play is their work. It's a learner-led experience. It's something they're doing for themselves. But just a couple of things to pick on play is the idea of, you talk about different types of play, but particularly deep play is an interesting concept, isn't it? And something worth chatting about, I think.
Yeah, because a lot of the things that you were talking about earlier, just when like you were a teenager, you used to go off with your mates, you used to go and light fires. We used to have a quarry just over, like it was like, we called it dump it. It was a bit like stick at the dump, it's one of those kind of things. We used to have a swing from the road up to the bottom, and it was probably about 100 foot down. And we had this swing, and there were bikes, and there was old bed things at the bottom and all of those kind of things. But I was watching one of the BBC film channels that was on, and it was a black and white film that was obviously filmed in the early 50s, and it was about this kid, and they were just leaving school, and they were being hit over the head by the teachers and all of that, and the bigger boys were outside, and they were all looking for jobs, and they got sacked from jobs because they were smoking outside and not working and all of this kind of stuff. But the kids were all playing on the derelict bomb site. That was their playground. And there was a couple of scenes as well where the kids were all outside, and the mothers were in, the dads were doing, and I'm not saying, gender stereotypical or whatever, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's just how that was at that time. The fathers went out to work, the mothers were at home, and, the kids were all outside, but all different ages, right from the babies to the 16, 17-year-olds. They were all outside all of the time with nothing. And like you said, they were playing with stones and they were doing and that, but they were also fighting. big black-eyed fighting, and the parents would come out. Would they stop them? Hardly ever, because they understood that actually what they're doing is learning how to stick up for themselves. Who's the strongest? They're learning about what we would call maybe, language play or communication play. They're learning who can you say these things to? Who can't you say things to? Deep play, getting right back in and feeling the tremor in your legs. When you think, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can do this. Having other children tell you that you can, not a grown up, but another child who says, look, watch me. And they do it and say, look, I'll help you across. I'll help you do it. That is the best teacher outside ever than any grown up, anybody. Most nurseries, all schools I know of, apart from one I've just been to in Bali last week, but most schools do not have family groups. Our kindergartens all have family groups. So they're from babies to 5, and they're all together. And the 5-year-olds make sure that not necessarily the little babies, but the toddlers have got their wellies on, they've got their coats on, they've got their lunches, they've got their rucksacks, they've got all of those things. The little ones sit there, the ones that can't even walk yet are looking up at the big ones. You're going, oh, we've got bunk hammocks, but you're not allowed in the top hammock, but you can't get in the top hammock unless you can climb in it, and so they're there going, let me in. And it's like, you're not allowed to help him. He's got to, or she's got to get up on her own, because as soon as she can do it, and therefore it's a struggle. So when we talk about deep play, I would put soaring into that as well as the fires. So soaring, all right? And it's like, oh yeah, it's just tools and it's that, but it's not tools. This is me. Tools isn't about tools. Tools is about building up muscles. If you use a big 24-inch bow saw and there's 2 of you and there's rules, and you go to me and you look at them in the eye and they look back and go to me, to me, to me, and you're in the respect position and you get me shouting at you on training because you're not kneeling properly or whatever, and then you haven't got your glove on your left hand or something, and you haven't got your 2 holders and you haven't got your safety officer. There's a community already. And you can have the person who's the least confident and they can sit and be a holder for 4 times until they can say, actually, now I want to be the follower or the leader. And so they can choose when they join in and which role they want. And so if somebody says this is about using tools and fires, yeah, but tools isn't about using tools. Tools is about building communication, eye contact, non-verbal communication, respect for other people, respect for the environment, respect for listening, taking it in turns, socializing, social distance. A 21 or 24-inch saw, you're in a social distance. That is how you approach people in a social space. Okay, that's how you don't step into someone's space until they tell you can.
And just thinking about that, because really, like you say, the tools and the fire, people are thinking about encountering those risky situations and conquering worry and fear. But do we, not we, but do adults, do you think, generally have a sort of fear of giving young children the freedom to encounter risky and dangerous play? I would be honest, I had a situation probably only a few weeks back when a young man at a local wood, they were hanging in the lower branches and doing various things, and he scuttled up a tree and he was about 50 feet off the ground in half a second, it felt, and he was just at the top in the wispy, I know he'd gone. And I must admit, sometimes I do get the squeaky feeling, oh no, that's too much, that's too far.
Yes.
But do you think we are, because they don't have the freedom we had maybe, to put themselves naturally in risky situations where they're monitoring themselves, and is that something we need to reintroduce?
Yeah.
And how do we do that? I mean, it's quite tricky to do. You've got your forest school situations, but how do we do it as a society where young children are happy to walk down the shops or happy to go and play on their own in the local brook or whatever, like we did,
They're not allowed to. That's
that's what I'm saying, yeah. Is the simple solution allow them to do it?
they're not allowed, well, because the parents are frightened. The media is all negative about stranger danger. There's no more stranger danger now than there was when we were little. And the reality is that most abuse happens in the home. Still, it did then. It still does. And I'm not saying it's not tragic and it's not awful and it's not terrible. Roads have got worse. Traffic's gone up.
I mean, yeah, it's so there is that over concern. The roads have got busier. When I was younger, we'd be playing street cricket half a day and nobody would come really down the street. Most people were at work in their cars, weren't they? And then they come back at a certain time. But now there does seem to be a lot more of that.
I was looking at, I'll see if I can find it out for you. It's one of those reels, and it was just about Japan and Japanese children walking home from school on their own.
Yeah, I've seen them. There's a whole TV program about it over here.
Oh, well, there. Maybe it was a snippet or something. There. So, okay. So if they're doing it in Tokyo, which is a very, very, very overly populated city, metropolis, then how can we reintroduce that into our culture? And it's going to take a lot of what's the word when you kind of like unravel something or reverse engineer?
Yep.
It's reverse engineer something, but reversing it so that it goes forwards.
The one thing I did want to talk about, though, and embarrassingly, I'm going to say straight out that I didn't actually recognise this was something you had personally developed, despite the fact that your name is in the title. Because when I'd originally sent you the idea for what to talk about in the podcast, and I'd talked a little bit about benefits the child's growth, and I'd mentioned Maslow, and I felt like I'd got a sort of a Sarah Blackwell metaphorical slap on the wrist for mentioning Maslow. And his needs and all the rest of it. And you'd come back at me with the Blackwell growth cycle, which, of course, when you said that, I went, oh, it's Blackwell, that's Sarah's. I hadn't even made that connection, honestly. I hadn't. So let's forget Maslow and toss him out the window, but talk briefly about your own model, the Blackwell growth cycle, if we could. And that'd be a really nice way to wrap up.
We talk about Maslow. We talk about these theories. We talk about them a lot. And we talk about them because they're easy. We talk about them because they're banded around. No matter where you go, somebody goes, no, it's like, oh, it's Maslow, or it's John Adair, or it's this, or it's that, or it's the other. It's the Colin Mortlock, whatever, and it's like, yeah. And we kind of like go, yes, but what does it mean? And you can say to most people, well, what is it? Well, it's about self-actualization, isn't it? So, well, yeah, okay, what's that? It's like, not really quite sure. Well, what are the bits that lead to self-actualization? Well, doesn't it start with something like eating and drinking or something? Yeah, okay, well, there's all of that. But what about the bits in between? Can't really remember. And the other thing as well is that I can't remember how much I wrote to you, actually. But my theory is that how on earth can you have a pinnacle like this? Right, I was actually describing this to one of our members of staff yesterday. I said to him, right, what was your first job? And he said it was being a bottle washer in a pub. I said, brilliant. I said, so you've left school. All right. You're at the height of your freedom. You've just got your very first job. Okay. In a way, you've actually self-actualized now by simply getting a job. But not only that, but you've actually gone all the way through the day. All right. And you've cleaned all the bottles and all the glasses and you're about to walk out through the door. Then surely that is a self-actualization. So basically, what have you got to look forward to now? It's done. It's hierarchy's done for you. You might as well just give up and go back to bed. And so I'm saying, right, okay, well, what about if we could use that to a certain extent, but actually have it on an ongoing basis? So it's cyclical. And not only is it cyclical, but it draws in a number of other things as well. So I'm very much into sort of like either, is it mnemonics or where you get words to mean something?
Like a mnemonic, yeah.
Yeah.
An acronym.
An acronym. So basically, but this one is very much B, which is biology. So we don't just need biology to feed us, but we need biology to live in as well. We need that as a fundamental. Okay, so we need to be embedded we need to be grounded. Our feet need to be on the ground. In Hong Kong, there are families and children who their feet have never ever touched the ground with concrete on the ground in Hong Kong, because they've got hundreds of stories of high-rise flats that are all interconnected by walkways. All the shops are in there, all the schools are in there, all the chemists, every single thing you need. There is no reason in the poorer communities to go down onto the ground. Why would you go down when you can just stay up high? They've never touched the ground.
That's almost unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
How long would that last then? The question: when would their feet touch the ground? What age could they go? Could they go their whole life without never touching the ground if they wanted to?
Sort of never, ever, ever done it.
It feels like some sort of dystopian future in a sci-fi movie, doesn't it?
Called Hong Kong.
Wow.
That bad. It's horrific. So we have to be in biology, taking us back. So we are of biology. We have to be embedded in the biology, not just consuming it. It reduces the cortisol levels. It reduces stress hormones. It increases at that unknown dopamine hits that we don't know because we're not used to listening to the sounds of nature. So the orchestra of sounds, which is out there, we can't hear it yet. It's so unconscious, but our brains are starting to listen and hear it, and that's what's reducing it. Okay, so we have our biology, and then from our biology, then we're going on to this this sense of boundaries. Okay, so our boundaries. So we all need, as we grow up, we need to have boundaries. We need to know that we're safe, and we need to know that we're secure, and we need to know that our parents love us or our caregivers love us. And that happens like this to start with when we're cradled. That's our boundary. I think I read some research, and I don't know this to be true. I think it is. It takes a child 9 months to grow inside a mother's womb. It takes them 9 months to be born out of their arms, to become their real person, their separate identity. And so that's a whole new way of thinking about how we protect and how we love and we give that emotional support to our children. So they need the boundaries, but the boundaries have to change, but there still have to be boundaries in there. Otherwise, is an innate fear that comes into children's hearts. And when it becomes there at that age, that fear is that will become part of their every cell. And it becomes a cellular thing that is very difficult to therapyize out. So we need to have a sense of belonging, but we need to have a structure in place that's appropriate for the age of the child and the age of the adult. The reality is that unless children are taught responsibility appropriate to their chronological age, appropriate to their maturational age, not their chronological age, and given boundaries appropriate to their maturational age and not their chronological age, then they will feel safe. And if they feel safe, they will feel secure. If they feel secure, they will be able to step out.
That's our biological and our boundaries, isn't it?
Our boundaries, yeah. Then what have we got next? Then I've gone off on my tangent there.
Belonging.
Belonging, yeah. So, so we've got the boundaries that we have here that have to be about maturational age. All right. And then what we're thinking about is how we can allow our children to create and build those relationships. So if we do the soaring, we're setting the boundaries up. Okay. We're doing the observations first. So we know we're not going to get, garroted by the saw or the axe or whatever first. We need to find out where our children are in terms of taking rules and regulations and behaviours. Once we get there, the saws are great because you're in a group of 5 people. You're setting up the boundaries. This is how we're going to do it. And then what you're doing is teaching them the social boundaries of how to do something. So if somebody is struggling, through observation, you as a forest school leader will be seeing, do they always talk to another grown-up? Or are they talking to their peers? Are they talking reciprocating, or are they talking listening, or are they talking and not listening? Because they're all very, very different ways of communicating. And it all shows us that we have a different issue that at forest schools, why forest schools has to be long term, that over a period of time that we need to be able to work on with that child. And we can't expect them to create new neural pathways on day one. They have to have them grown step by step by step by step. And that's why they have to come back and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And it's the same thing. So we'll start off. It's like somebody says to me, we always got to use gloves. And I said, well, if you go down to the carpenter's shop, does he wear a glove? No. Why do you think he doesn't wear a glove? Well, because he knows how to do it. Well, exactly. But do our children know how to do it? No. I mean, most of the practitioners that come on the training don't know how to do it. You know, they've never held a hammer. They've never held a saw. They don't know how the fact that they're going to hit a nail, that it's actually going to hurt because they're going to miss it. And it blinking does hurt. And so what we're doing is saying, they go, well, I've got no friends. And it's like, right, remember, see it in your mind when you were doing the sawing. How many people were there? 5. Oh, yeah, you've got 5 people who were with you. That's 4 friends. You've already got 4 friends doing this verbal back and forth, because you're getting children to use their voice, especially if they're stuck on screens. They don't know how to speak. What tone of voice do I use? How can I laugh? How can I express the fact that I like you, or I don't like you, or I like you too much? So we're teaching them how to belong through using these processes that we're doing at forest schools every day, that school does not teach. Sitting down at a desk and listening and doing, whether it's group work or whatever, you'll always have the person who feels nervous, who feels an outsider, who doesn't know what to say, discombobulated from the group.
I mean, it's interesting when you say it like that, because sometimes, take the tools aside as well, and those activities aside, sometimes just the activity of being outdoors, I've seen it when you take groups outdoors with no activities, that communication improves. That sort of young people who were not friends or don't particularly get on in class will suddenly communicate with each other. They suddenly know how loud to be or not be. And it's strange to watch someone like a magical process that communication can be impacted just by being outdoors. There's also that sense of belonging of we are outdoors together. Just seems to be a natural trigger, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's what nature, because there's an unconscious reality in the fact that in my view, is that because we are biological, is that we have this understanding. People have to draw it out of us and tell us to start with that this is what's happening, is the fact that the whole of an ecosystem works together. Okay, so a tree might die, but the tree's not dead, because all the nutrients that are in that tree that have come from the soil come from the mitochondria that has been traveled from another tree. And that's coming from that other tree is already dead, but the nutrients are then coming up to draw it up. And then you've got the insects that are inside it, and then you've got the spiders and all of these kind of things. And it's always this sense of belonging. I can't belong if I'm a certain bee without this type of blue flower, because I need the bee to come in to pollinate me. But it has to be this bee, because it's this bee that then will take my pollen into the next one. And so without the bee, then the flower dies. And we're beginning to see how the sun impacts on the plants. When there's a clearing coming in the spring, which is why seasons are so important, that children see all the seasons. Okay, what's it like in the winter when everything's closed down? What's it like in the summer? What's it like in the spring? Why is it that you can put a stethoscope to a birch tree and you can hear the sap going up it? Can you imagine the straw, the suck on that? As it's drawing it up, it's immense. But we can start to have that awe and wonder and that sense of our own, minusculity and the immenseness of the universe, but also about how powerful that we are and how we can influence something so tiny and so small as well.
I can give you a lovely example of that just recently from this camping trip I've been on with my girls, just coming back from a 3 a.m. wee with my youngest, and just walking back from the cubicle the toilets were through to the camping pitch. And it was a starry night. It wasn't when we went to bed, but when we got up, it was one of those skies, every star's out. And she just paused, just naturally stopped and looked up and went, just look at the stars. Like there's just sort of this moment of like, what on earth is that up there? Do you know what I mean? And then we pointed out there's a bright red one on the horizon, which must have been a planet. And then we touched on the plough, which is normally higher above our house. It was lower in the sky, and she remembered the 3 on Orion's belt. And it is that, if you can teach young people to have wonder, like you say, about nature, or listening, what's that noise? Well, that's a fox. She can now identify a noise to catch her. She knows what a pheasant sounds like, all these things, because you're out and about and asking questions, isn't it? And that's the key, really. When you're out and about in nature, it naturally creates questions, because things happen and the kids want to go, what's that? It's amazing.
As long as somebody to trust.
And that's what I've got my note on the side. They need to feel trusted and believed in, don't they? With this sense of belonging as well. Yeah.
So the whole of the that sense of belonging then can kind of like move into that sense of belief. Because I belong, and that means then that I can start to believe somebody else believes in me. And if they believe in me, then actually maybe I can begin for the first time in my life to believe in myself, even if it's just one thing. And this is why I can't self-actualize all the time. I can only do it. I can believe in it. I have to believe in who I am. And then I can start to build. And I get one rock and then another and another and another. And I get stronger. And each one of those will take me closer to what my aspirations are, or my goals or my dreams have been, that have seemed so far away from me in the past, because they've been unachievable, because I can't believe them. And that's what the belonging gives, that love and security gives.
And I guess that's where that sort of sense of belonging then trips into that sense of self-identity and confidence building, which creates your independence, which is your next one on the cycle, isn't it? When you're
the goals and the dreams are very, very important, and the self-worth comes from that. And that goes back to our on a cellular level. That's where it is. Our self-worth is there. And then it goes from that to our sense of brilliance, because then we achieve something. We can stand on top of that wall and we can shine. And we're not necessarily shining for the world, or shining for ourselves.
How each child shines is different. And that's what your aim is. And if you go right back to the very start, one of the first things you said in this podcast is about you wanting to work with young people on an individual level and follow their uniqueness. And this journey through Forest School has ended up with this, the Blackwell growth cycle, which has ended up on this belief system, whether it's belief in themselves on whatever level, conscious, unconscious, this positive mental attitude, and fabulous. Sarah, I didn't expect this conversation to go this way. It's been amazing, and it's been a philosophy lesson. It's been a lesson in touching on biology. It's been a bit about what maybe people traditionally think of as forest school, but I think it's been really, really enjoyable. I feel quite privileged that you agreed to come on. Actually, and I've had this insight into your world, even right from the beginning. Your sort of biography, and then right through to where we are. And I guess the lesson for educators and teachers, if they are listening to this, is that they need to think about that in their class, to look at those young people. Who were you're saying, when you were younger, who didn't like school, didn't like that, but allowing them to find their thing and supporting them in that.
I think one of the key things there, just to highlight, and I think this is important as a message then, is that if we're talking about intrinsic motivation, we talked about the young people who learn off TikTok and YouTube and all of that, and they're doing it because they're curious about it. They're doing it because it sparks some kind of interest in them, and it gives them some kind of satisfaction. It gives them a satisfaction. So if it gives them some kind of satisfaction, then they want to know more about it. And that word is called curious. I want to know more about it. It's pushing me. It's an emotion, which is from the Latin word, which means to move. We're moving towards it. So our teachers, if we want to be successful in school, I'm a teacher, so I can say this. That's my words, you see. I can say that because I am a teacher. But because is that we need to maintain and build on somebody's level of curiosity. We need to build on it. And then as soon as that starts to slow down again, this is where our observations, this is why Forest School's observations are so important. It's like, right, okay, when is that interest starting to wane? When's that catalyst starting to decrease? Because when the catalyst, that curiosity, that internal motivation is going down, that's the point where we need to think as leaders or practitioners or teachers or parents, is that what's similar but slightly different? what's now going to be a challenge, but not too big of a challenge, but can lead into a challenge. So they can then actually start to step out and step forward, but it's their journey. So it has to come from them. But if we get good at what we're doing, then we can start to provide the resources that that young person needs in order for them to continue. But it might be that you give them 2 or 3 things to jump on, and then they choose one, and then you go down that route. Yeah.
That's a fabulous point to end. I really appreciate you coming on. I've really enjoyed it.
Good. Well, I've really enjoyed myself as well. So thank you very much.